This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Barricade 2 herbicide from FMC. Barricade 2 herbicide destroys tough broadleaf weeds like narrow-leaved hawksbeard, cleavers, night flowering catchfly, and kochia without compromising the safety of your cereal crop. Barricade 2 herbicide. Tough on weeds, gentle on crops.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. It is great to have you with us here today, and I am, quite frankly, really looking forward to today's show because last week we didn't do a RealAg Issues panel, just how the schedule worked out, but we're back here today. I almost thought about doing a bit of a double dip where we did the panel earlier in the week and today, but I restrained myself. But it is great to have Lyndsey Smith and Kelvin Heppner, both of RealAgriculture, with us here today. And we're going to break down the biggest issues of the week. A lot happened in Ottawa. There's a lot happening on the trade front. We got economic news. We got issues with Immigration Minister Miller talking about restraining, or I guess restricting the number of TFWs that can come into the country. That's going to have an impact on agriculture. We got that and a whole lot more. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion and get Kelvin and Lyndsey's perspectives, and I'll share some of my own as well, as you know I will. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the social media platforms, or if you're so inclined, you can always call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. You know, earlier this week, I shared some of my thoughts when it comes to Bill 282. I want to reinforce for some people, and I said it to clarify my thoughts before I gave you my opinion. I'll say it again. My comments about Bill 282 have nothing to do with whether you're pro or anti-supply management. It has to do with the impact or potential lack thereof impact that this legislation is going to have on the outcome that people are trying to push for and desire that are pushing for the legislation. It's ineffective. That's what I'm trying to say to you. And it's creating a false sense of security in terms of what's going to happen going forward. That was my point about the whole thing. I think you're being misled on what the legislation is actually going to do, and that's what I'm hearing from trade experts. That's what I'm hearing from people that are in the bubble of Ottawa, even in some of the farm groups that you would think would be very much in support of 282. I think Steve Verhoeven, as I mentioned, is a very good example. He is a trade negotiator, and he is saying it doesn't exactly defend the castle. And my comparison is a little bit, 282 is legislation to protect us from giving up supply management access. I think it's kind of like in the Three Little Pigs, sort of the house made of sticks. And we know what the wolf did with the house made of sticks. Okay, we're going to get to the RealAg Issues panel right after this. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure Oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for the RealAg Issues Panel. And there is lots to discuss. We didn't do this last week, so I feel like we're pent up. We're really ready to rock on a lot of different things that have been happening in the world of agriculture. This segment's brought to you by Co-op. Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. Co-op, here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more by going to Co-op's website, co-op.crs/farm, or just Google Co-op. Okay, joining us is Kelvin Heppner, coming out of Altona, Manitoba. Hey, Kelvin, how's this winter treating you?
So far, so good. And right now I'm enjoying the heat inside because shortly this afternoon, I, along with 18 others, will be jumping into a frozen pond as part of a polar plunge put on by Patura Seeds here in Manitoba in support of STARS Air Ambulance. So enjoying the heat while I can right now.
Lots of ways to support STARS. That's one crazy way to do it, Kelvin.
And I think it is an important cause, especially in areas where our audience lives in Western Canada. Of course, their helicopter fleet. To me, it's about life expectancy and quality of life in rural areas in terms of getting to a hospital when you need to. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people probably know somebody that's had to ride in that famous or infamous red helicopter, and so we're doing our part today to try to raise some funds for STARS.
Well, I'm helping support STARS in the summer when they have their big event in July. I'm the MC of that. I prefer that.
Oh,
method.
Nice.
And
that's at the Calgary Stampede.
Yeah, no. Ag in Motion.
Ag in Motion. Oh, yes, they have a big fundraiser there too. You're right. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm MCing that event. Wouldn't it be?
How do you get the warm one?
What's that?
How do you get the warm one? The warm fundraiser.
Because I would say no to the polar plunge. I hate the cold. Wouldn't it be ironic if the STARS helicopter had to come pick you up at the STARS fundraiser because your heart stopped jumping into the cold water?
Mm-hmm.
I know the fire department and also the HART team, which is the Hutterite dive team that also comes into when there's unfortunate circumstances involving water. They're going to be on the scene as well. So I'm feeling pretty safe. It's just a matter of the temperature and the shock in the moment.
Well, also joining us is Lyndsey Smith out of Ottawa. Lyndsey, did he just say Hutterite dive team?
I am learning a lot today.
Yeah, me too.
Because I had no idea that such a thing existed, which is super cool. I am glad to know that they will be there as well as the fire department. I wanted to jump in with did you know Quebec is the only province without a emergency helicopter service? And definitely one of those things that for health advocates in Quebec, it's definitely one of the things that they've wanted to change because, to Kelvin's point, this is, especially for those rural and remote areas, just an absolute, literal lifesaver for so many. So hats off to you, Kelvin. I'm going to stay warm in my house today, drinking hot coffee while you plunge into an ice cold pond. So well done. Not going to do it.
Very chilling. But you know what, Kelvin?
I haven't actually done it yet, so
yeah, everybody stay tuned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway.
all I can
Updates
say is
on social media.
Just flush down 3 Manhattans right before you jump in. That will that'll keep you insulated from the inside.
No, Red Bulls. Do just slam 2 Red Bulls. Go. Yeah.
Isn't your heart already
Make my heart stop.
going really?
Well, but then you're going to go into the cold, and then I think you need to keep it going. I'm a little concerned. Anyway.
There are people that do this every day for fitness, though, so that's where
I was actually going to say, what if you really love this, Kelvin, and it becomes your new morning ritual is you do a cold plunge? Imagine. That's what happens next.
Sounds like a Shaun thing to do.
No, he hates the cold. He's going to do the
I'm
July.
more the sauna guy. I like the 20-25 minutes of the sauna every day. Never the cold plunge out for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I hate the chill. Okay. To real matters, like the health of my March Madness bracket, not doing well. The state of Kentucky, very, very upset. Lyndsey and Kelvin didn't even fill out brackets, which I questioned how that, this is one of the best times of the year. What are you guys doing?
So I would like everyone to know in our audience that Shaun did ask, hey, how's everybody got their brackets? And I was like, for a cupboard? What are we bracketing?
I was the
I don't
only one on
understand.
the entire team.
I don't even know where the heck these games are played. I don't know. It's, you know what? I don't, it's great. I'm super excited for the athletes, I think. Right? I don't know.
Well, we have a family bracket, like a challenge.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
Of course you do.
Led my two boys being the instigators, and it's, with March Madness brackets, like everybody's like, oh, I don't even watch basketball. Like, you know, we have in March Madness bracket challenges, it doesn't really matter because it's chaos. So anybody can win, even you, Lyndsey.
So, okay. So what I would do though, and Kelvin, back me up on this one. If I don't know anything about the teams or the players, the whatever, I just go by like either uniforms or color or team names, or if I, so, but who knows? Maybe I could win, Shaun. Maybe I could win. We'll see.
Well, anybody can win when Oakland beats Kentucky, and as somebody
Don't know what that
like,
means.
only in March Madness can like a future insurance broker
Be
win
the
a
star
game versus future like top 5 picks in the NBA. So it's that kind of craziness. Okay,
All right.
hey, snow. And I mentioned winter conditions. Kelvin, the Western Canada is seeing some honestly much needed snowfall here this week. Somebody described it to me in southern Alberta, where I think in some places upwards of 30 centimeters of snow, worst roads they've seen in 15 years. That is going to be music to the ears of some farmers.
Yeah, certainly. Along with the prospects of drought being so strong right now, any moisture, even if it is here at the end of March when we're starting to look to get into the field and getting equipment ready and that type of thing, moisture in any form is welcome in terms of the moisture that it provides, also protecting the soil and from wind erosion and all that other stuff that's been happening for too much of this winter. So yeah, that snow, it didn't reach here on the eastern side of the prairies, at least it hasn't yet, but we have seen a bit of a return to more winter type weather here the last week, which, yeah, maybe it's a good thing in terms of slowing things down and not getting as antsy about being in the field in early April, which I'm not sure is necessarily a good thing.
But if you took the strategy of, like, you know, AFC's Brian Bears, ultra early seeding, and you had that seed in the ground already, and all this wet snow comes, you are looking pretty, Lyndsey.
And actually, Brian's going to join me on the Agronomist on April 1st. Yes, April Fools. And that will definitely be one of the questions that we talk about. And this is actually in some ways sort of the point of that ultra early seeding, is that if conditions were good in, you know, early March and the ground was dry and thawed and off you go and you put that wheat in the ground, this could be the best wheat for the area if the tap doesn't turn back on come spring. So I think, and we'll ask Brian about it on the 1st, but I think that he probably is pretty excited on what this might teach us on ultra early seeding in Alberta.
Yeah, the other thing we saw this week. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kelvin.
I was just going to say, any word on how much the snow provides in terms of irrigation recharge and some of the concerns about irrigation in Alberta and even in parts of Saskatchewan this year, Shaun?
You're the 5th person today that's asked me that question.
It's a common one.
I
don't think it's
know.
enough.
But here, what I'm sensing from growers, you know, with all of the concern about supply of water, I'm still sensing like a lot of optimism around what's going to happen. Like, hey, like we still have time kind of mentality. I know the city of Lethbridge, for example, where I live, is somewhat concerned about the lowness when it comes to the river and the dam or the reservoir at St. Mary's. So too early to tell, I think. Here's what we did learn, though. When we saw the provincial government in Alberta did not step up with payments based on some of the things that happened in the LNID district, where water couldn't be supplied because of leaks, not shortage of water, but leaks to the pipeline. Growers who had to cut back on some of their water that didn't irrigate as much as they had previously in previous years that were traditionally of, the yield worked out pretty decent. And so that, I think that was maybe kind of a learning lesson. And maybe, hey, listen, maybe the weather cooperated, probably. Every year is not the same. But I know some growers have been asking themselves, maybe I could cut back on the amount of water that I've actually have to use. Now, that maybe requires more than 1 year of data. But that's kind of a sentiment I've heard kind of frequently from people. Lyndsey, Premier Ford showed up at the Grain Farmers of Ontario meeting this week. That was pretty interesting. Big surprise visit.
Big surprise. So I mean, premiers don't always, by any stretch, show up at our farm meetings, that's for sure. GFO, Grain Farmers of Ontario, represents roughly 27,000 farmers in the province who grow the 5 top crops here in the province. And there wasn't really any indication that he would be there. Probably, I'm guessing, organizers were hedging their bets that his schedule could change at the last minute. So there wasn't a lot of hubbub before. So for people in the audience, including our own Bern Tobin, it was a bit of a surprise to have him show up. He did speak, actually, he gave a quite lengthy speech, I think, for having shown up. We do have it up on RealAgriculture.com. We've got the whole video. His team did record it and put it up on YouTube. And definitely, to no one's surprise, the carbon tax was front and center on the discussion list, on the hit list. And this is something that we're seeing mirrored on the federal side for sure. But of course, as on the provincial side, as each different, I mean, we even saw this week, I think the Liberal Party in Ontario is even talking about how this carbon tax is not a good thing. So how's that for a turn of events? So not surprising, got a lot of support on that front for sure, and it just sort of adds to the noise on the carbon tax at a federal level as well that we saw this week.
Well, we're going to talk about the carbon tax and what the Conservatives were up to this week, and where does the whole branding and implementation and effectiveness of the carbon tax sit with Canadians as we head into the second quarter of 2024. You're listening to RealAg Radio, World Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Want a product that will give you nitrogen all season long? Then you want to try Envita. Envita gets directly into the cells of the plants, and it's easy to apply, foliar or in furrow. Envita provides the flexibility you need for your farm practices. Whether you want to reduce your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain your nitrogen and increase yield, Envita fits your farm. Envita SC formulation is OMRI registered. To learn more about Envita, visit azotic.com. That's AZOTIC.com.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday. Shaun Haney, Lyndsey Smith, and Kelvin Heppner breaking down the biggest issues of the week. This segment is brought to you by Field Heroes, powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Visit fieldheroes.ca to learn how beneficial insects can benefit your farm. Those beneficial insects working for you for free. Hey, make sure you also check out the Pest and Predator podcast that is also brought to you by Field Heroes, funded by WGRF as well. You can find that at realagriculture.com or, wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, also this week, gang, we were talking about the carbon tax. We saw the Conservatives make an attempt, Kelvin, to follow the government based on a vote around the carbon tax. What exactly happened here, and what are the impacts?
Yeah, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives continue to hammer on the federal Liberals and their carbon tax policy, or their price on pollution, as the Prime Minister likes to call it. And yesterday they introduced a confidence motion, and it did not pass. The NDP and Bloc voted against it along with the Liberals, so that didn't really come as a surprise. But this was Poilievre and the Conservatives kind of having everybody on the record. And I think ultimately this is about getting those clips for social media and other places where they're going to have shots of NDP and Bloc MPs voting against this motion regarding the carbon tax. So that's I think what the outcome or the value was for the Conservatives yesterday in terms of it wasn't that anybody realistically expected it to pass, but they continue to hammer on this policy. Justin Trudeau continues to repeat that the last 3 elections have been votes on this carbon price or tax policy. I would think that there's a pretty clear argument, though, that it's much higher priority for Canadians and voters now than it was during the last 3 elections, when cost of living and the impact at the grocery store and everywhere else wasn't felt as significantly as is perceived today.
Yeah, like when Trudeau beat Harper, it was about cannabis. It wasn't about the carbon tax, as an example.
Well, and also, early on, what was it? We were promised the carbon tax will never be more than $50 a ton. Never. What's it going up to April 1st?
We're up to 85, I think, or 80?
We're up to 80,
yeah, somewhere there.
On April 1.
On track to 170.
Yeah, on track to 170. We were told it'd be, so even if you were to believe or agree that Trudeau said we went to an election on a carbon tax, it was, at least in the beginning, it was a carbon tax that was promised not to exceed $50 a ton, which we're long past that now and going up past that. So there's that little tidbit. The other thing is we had 0% interest rates and inflation was in line. And so, I don't know that I believe at all, and I don't think anyone really does, that the last elections were on a carbon tax, and certainly not on affordability, which is what the Conservatives really are framing this next election on. Definitely some discussions this week on, and in seeing a confidence motion like this, are we going to see an election before next October? Could enough happen between now and then to trigger something before? Kelvin, I would love to know, what do you think would have to happen for us to go to the polls before next October? And that's October 25, by the way.
Well, it would have to be something where the NDP dropped their supply and confidence agreement, or I forget the exact terminology, something like that. Their partnership coalition with the Liberal Party. The NDP would have to stop backing the Liberals in one of these votes, whether it's, we also have a budget coming up, which is always a confidence vote, also the budget approval, and that's coming up in a few weeks, middle of April. So there will be more opportunities, but I don't think that Jagmeet Singh and the NDP are interested in having an election yet. His pension isn't fully qualified yet, and there's other factors. Of course, their fundraising and everything else. They're maybe not in a situation where they want an election. They might feel that they can get more done in terms of holding the Liberals in this agreement and making them live up to promises that the Liberals have made to the NDP. So but on one hand, I do. So we talked about this a bit yesterday with Poilievre and the Conservatives introducing this confidence vote or this motion in terms of they probably want an election sooner than later in terms of if inflation is easing. We're starting to see some economic data that shows that the overall situation is easing. Bank of Canada and other central banks talking about potentially reducing rates and that type of thing. And so as the economic and financial pain potentially eases, that might hurt the Conservatives in the polls. And so maybe they want an election sooner than later. I think there's a flip side to that too, though, where Poilievre probably wants to time his transition, assuming the Conservatives win the next election. He probably wants to time that transition into a spot where it looks like they're actually solving some of these things when a lot of it is beyond their control. Because if say the government had fallen on the vote yesterday and Poilievre comes in, and the next, certainly the housing situation in Canada, housing crisis that is frustrating for especially younger Canadians, that's not getting resolved for a couple of years. And so a Poilievre government might want to only come in a couple of years when things are already on the upswing kind of things, or in a bit later, not in a couple of years, but a bit later in terms of timing it. So there's timing things to be considered here for all the Liberals, NDP, and the Conservatives when it comes to when they want the next election. And I think you can say that Conservatives might want it sooner than later, but a little bit later down the road wouldn't be bad for their prospects and Canadians' perceptions of the party either.
Do you really think people follow with that much nuance? No matter when they come in, and there is the upswing, the recovery as the pendulum moves, they're going to claim it anyway, whether they should or they should.
Yeah, but if it takes 4 years, for housing under It's a matter of how. I just mean if the Conservatives come in and it's still rough and the economy is still struggling for another 3-4 years into the next election, well, that's a much more difficult situation for their prospects going forward than if it's already turned around when they come in, or on the trajectory is already changing.
When I was at the Saskatoon Cargill Market Sense event last week, after I did my after dinner speech, there was a member of the audience that made that point about Jagmeet Singh and qualifying for his pension as being a critical date, which I thought was a really, really good point from a member of the audience. You know, I think one of the things,
kind of petty, but things like that do factor into political decisions too.
Absolutely, they do.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
But like politicians,
Sides,
it's not as what's good for the country as everybody tries to make it out to be at many times. Come on, these are factors. I do think though that one of the variables though would be if the NDP felt super confident that they were going to have more seats than the Liberals. That is maybe one piece, but yeah, I don't see it all happening anytime soon.
No.
But it's.
I love that we've and Kelvin, actually, you've done both of it. That we've pointed out the politicking of Jagmeet Singh's full pension, and also having a confidence motion being nothing more than to get sound bites for an impending election. We are a cynical bunch, y'all.
But you know what? How is that different than 282? How is that? This is.
You want to get back to 282, do you? Okay.
Well, there's members of the audience that did not listen very well. We need to work on listening. People very upset.
Hey, listen, you asked for feedback. Feedback, and they feedback.
Well, and if one piece of what I said,
and if I may, I on yesterday's show asked people to volunteer new farmers for the Farmer Rapid Fire, because most people won't call and say I want to be on, but they'll for sure nominate someone else. And I got an email this morning. So people do listen and they are sending feedback, but not all of it is loving and fun like that one.
The whole premise of 282 was basically to mark who's in support of supply management and who is not. And that's not what 282 is really about, but that's what it's been made out to be.
Yes.
And it convinced me differently. Like, you know, it wanted to be, it was a test of different MPs in terms of where do you stand, and just because somebody voted some way doesn't mean that that's where they stand. That's another part of politics that, in our system, that's a little bit different than you do see south of the border, where there's a little bit more independence on, you know, on members of Congress than we have here. But yeah, I'm feeling very cynical all of a sudden.
Wedge politics. Wedge politics is it's a routine thing. So, and I think we're only going to see more of it as as a federal election.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people that go. I think that you're exactly right, Kelvin. I think this is what politics is, and there's a lot of people that are naive that it's about other things, and they go to the legislature, they go to Parliament, and they are quickly shown how the sausage is made, and it's not what they sort of thought it was in terms of like
I think that at times, though, I mean, there's a difference between governing and politicking. But you're right, Shaun, that realistically, you know, I'm sure we have a lot of fresh-faced MPs that want to go and, you know, make the difference, and they're going to be different, and you give them enough time and they're just as cynical as we are. So there you go. But I mean, let's face it, you know, it's not easy to run a federal campaign and convince the majority of Canadians, or at least the majority of ridings, that you are, or their person in their riding, and you then as the leader are the next prime minister. It is a huge undertaking, and of course this takes months and years of planning and putting these things together, getting that messaging on point, getting your platform all put together. So I mean, it does, there's a whole team behind these people to try and get all these sound bites. And
you know, it's funny, at the end of all the different, you know, talks that I've given through the winter, Lyndsey, the same question. Somebody will come up to me and say, like, that was great. When are you running? And my it's like, never, ever, nada. Yeah. And I've told my wife, if I ever utter ever utter any suggestion, just kick me in the butt.
Right in the stomach.
Power of
You
attorney
say
kicks in then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we got to take a quick break. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147. Sirius XM.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
If you're a soybean grower in the Midwest, you should also be thinking about Excite Bio. Excite your crops with inputs from Excite Bio. Access nitrogen and phosphorus with Excite Bio's lineup of inoculants and ag biologicals. Since 2010, they've been helping farmers harness the power of the soil. Learn more at excitebio.ca. That's XITEBIO.ca. Excite Bio. Great stuff. Okay. We are talking here, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, Shaun Haney, all of RealAgriculture. And we were just talking about some of the politics and stuff like that. But Kelvin, just to hammer down this point, inflation numbers this week are very much the positive. You're looking for prices to somewhat moderate.
Yeah, if you're looking for prices to moderate and also for the central bank to start cutting rates, this is a positive indicator that we heard from Stats Canada this week with CPI coming in at 2.8% year over year. That was well below what the market was expecting. On the grocery side of things, grocery inflation slowed to 2.4% in February year over year, which I think is obviously quite reflective of what we've seen over the last year in food-based commodity markets. But we're starting to see some of these things come down. Shelter inflation growth continue to accelerate, with rent inflation increasing almost 8% in February. And of course, mortgage interest costs are part of that. That's where it's a double-edged sword, the central bank's tool of raising interest rates. But I think this is a sign that things are easing. And again, from a political perspective, this is something that if the economy starts turning around and looking rosier, does that take away some of the sentiment that is leading to strong support for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives? That goes back to our conversation about timing in a political cycle right now.
My thoughts are changing. I was believing the narrative that Canada would not lower rates until after the Fed. But I think based on some of the data we're seeing, I think Canada moves first. I believe we saw Mexico move this week. I think Canada moved before the Fed, if you look at some of the numbers. There's also this uncomfortable U.S. election in the fall, and what does the Fed do prior or after that election? And those are separate, but there's also not wanting to create the perceptions of doing something that may help or hurt one of the sides. It's that's a pretty volatile situation. So I think Canada lowers before the U.S. is kind of my thought at this point, but.
Okay, can we just pause on that for a second? Really?
Yeah.
Kelvin, do you agree with that? I don't know. So Kelvin, before you answer, we've got the carbon tax going up April 1, which is going to add 3.3 cents per liter to fuel, roughly. And then we've still got that mortgage and rent going up, which is a huge part of the cost of living. I don't know that I agree. So, Kelvin, where do you sit? Be the tiebreaker, because I disagree, I think.
I think I'm probably opposite Shaun in thinking Canada will fall. And it's probably because of that housing.
You should bet.
Yeah. We're not on March Madness, but maybe on this weekend, Shaun.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the housing situation is more pronounced in Canada in terms of supply not meeting demand, and that will take longer to resolve. And we're
If you're
seasonally
waiting for resolution on that, then like how far out is the cut then?
Well,
I just think they can't deviate too far from what the Fed does in the U.S. So I think it's a month or two after the U.S. does.
But our housing situation.
But I think sorry.
But our housing situation won't be solved.
Oh, it won't be. But
no.
Canada can't keep rates high if the U.S. is dropping theirs, and so I think our housing situation is just more of an issue, and it's something that I don't think Canada can lead on this because of that.
Okay, audience.
And we're also the time of year where real estate is moving, and I think we're probably seeing things heat up a little bit more than what the central bank would like to see, anecdotally right now.
Yeah, I know in Lethbridge things look pretty not a lot of inventory, but steamy for the stuff that
that's not what Tiff Macklin wants right now.
Right.
Okay, we'll see. We'll see who wins this. This bet where we haven't figured out what Kelvin's going to do when he loses, but Sean
will jump in a frozen pond.
Yeah, there you go. I was going to say, Sean, if you lose, you have to do the next polar plunge.
No. Well, we did hear this week, tied to this real estate issue, a couple things. We did see that now the government is talking about reducing the amount of TFWs that are going to come. Now, this is follow up to what Minister Miller has said in the past, but now we've actually got numbers attached to it where we're moving down from like 6.5% to 4.5% TFWs are a part of the Canadian population. Lyndsey, I would imagine that the horticulture industry, which, CFA would be, a representative as a voice of that, we're going to hear a big pushback on the impacts of this. It just seems like we're increasing the amount of paperwork someone would actually have to do to get a TFW in the first place, which is already laborious.
It is. And we're also saying, we're hearing from the government that the total number of spots will full stop, regardless of how many hoops you jump through. Once we reach that number, it doesn't matter anymore. So to me, this is, and we've seen this before, where we have, potentially two policies or two different angles of the government sort of working against each other again. So we've got on one hand this discussion that, we're supposed to be solving the labor crisis in agriculture. We've got money for, CARC to help, train and attract new people into agriculture. And that's good and that's great. But realistically, that's sort of a long-term thing. The season happens regardless, right? So as policies work themselves out, as training, as all that works themselves through in over a couple of years, we still have, asparagus to get snipped in a couple of weeks. We've still got, dairy farms that depend on foreign labor potentially. Big time in the hort side. On the processing side, we see a lot of that.
Our entire meat industry.
Our entire meat industry, our honey industry. There's a lot of TFWs that come in for the honey industry. And I know that there's a difference between temporary foreign workers and just seasonal workers. We know that. But this is a part of agriculture. And it's not like Canadian farms and farmers and farm businesses don't try to hire locally, but realistically, this is not necessarily a lot of these jobs. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them are not necessarily jobs that Canadians are knocking down the door to say they want. And this is our food system. This is a perishable product that has to be harvested at a certain time, but first planted at a certain time. And so this idea that, I understand from the government's perspective, we have a challenge in housing how many people we have welcomed into this country. But at the same time, if we're going to talk about hard stops on the number of people, there needs to be some sort of balance here on, who we're letting in or when or for how long. And realistically, I think that we're still not addressing the problem of we've brought people into this country in the past couple of years, a lot of them, and we're not connecting them with the jobs that are available. So to me, this is almost, I don't want to call it lazy per se, but it's almost like it's too simple of a solution to a much more complicated problem.
Yep. Yeah. It bugs me so we've heard Immigration Minister Mark Miller say multiple times now that Canada is addicted to foreign or temporary foreign workers, that our economy is addicted to them. I really struggle with that. And maybe that is the case in some sectors that I'm not familiar with, but in agriculture, we're addicted to not, like Lyndsey said, to not doing the work that these workers are willing to do, and to our food cost prices being where they are. Let's face it, if Canadians are expected to do the work that a lot of temporary foreign workers are doing, wages are going to be dramatically higher, and labor is already often one of the biggest, if not the biggest, cost component of what our food prices are. We're going to see more food inflation and that type of thing if they crack down. And I know there are some exemptions or things, carve-outs for agriculture when it comes to the targets that they're setting for temporary foreign workers, but ultimately I'm concerned that people haven't thought through all the consequences, like Lyndsey said.
So you're both wrong. Food prices aren't going up.
Here we go.
Because all we're going to do is we're just going to import cheaper food from somewhere else.
You're right. For that, yeah.
Okay, no, because we need a carbon border adjustment, and people in the grocery store absolutely read.
This has nothing to do with carbon.
What are you talking about?
And the labor standards border adjustment.
Yeah. The labor standards, and everybody reads labels. Everybody knows not to buy those Chinese peas.
Do not give anybody those ideas.
Oh my gosh.
How could you?
What are you talking about? That is exactly what our ESG or whatever we're talking about. Yeah, no, but that is what that labor component, that's a big part of a lot of the discussions on sustainability and, certifying that Canadian soybeans aren't, grown using, child labor or whatever. This is already a part of how food and food ingredients get traded on a world scale. And so it does beg the question. So if Canada says, we can't house these people, you're not allowed to come into Canada, and then nobody in Canada is willing to go and pick asparagus, then you're right. We're going to import it from somewhere else because everybody expects it to be there, and grocery stores are going to import it. And then we're all supposed to just be like, no, it's cool. However it gets produced in China, it's cool. Bring it on over.
And I want to make it clear, that's not the situation I'm endorsing. I'm just telling you what some of the impacts are going to be.
Yes.
There is some irony in the fact that we're not willing to take as many temporary foreign workers from some of these countries to, so we have at-home production here in Canada, but we're fully comfortable in importing the same products from those countries that those people are coming from, and that is a better outcome because we sort of feel better about ourselves. Like, it doesn't make
Meanwhile, they're paid less and have lower labor standards in those countries.
Yes,
exactly. This, I think you hit it right on the head, Lyndsey, in terms of we are looking at solving this housing crisis through the narrowest of lanes. And this is the Liberal government trying to, because who traditionally is very used to cutting a very wide swath on the political pendulum, taking more of a position that speaks to more of a populist side in terms of like, you worker, you are being treated unfairly. These companies are bypassing you and bringing people in from around the world and cheating you out of higher wages so you can afford that already very expensive home in Canada. It's not solving the problem. It's trying to score political points at best is my thought.
This show is sponsored by Cynics Everywhere. Anyway, no, but it is a good point, right? In that, to me, there's almost this, like, the government on one hand is trying to say exactly that, but then on the, like, to the flip side of it is also saying, these workers are treated so terribly in Canada. How dare we be addicted to this, cheap labor, as Kelvin pointed out, because that's actually been said. So there's this, like, in between where it's in direct opposition to each other and so I really wish we would take a step back and say, okay, this is a far more complicated issue, and actually dig into the labor needs of this industry and trying to match up the needs with some of these people, and just recognizing the realities of a workforce that potentially is only here for 6 months out of the year or 8 months out of the year, and that they realistically serve an incredible purpose in our food system here, and work within those parameters.
For balanced nutrition with micronutrients, the best answer is WolfTrax DDP from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how WolfTrax can ensure nutrient availability through a crop's growth cycle, all you got to do is simple, one thing. Visit kochag.ca. We've got more coming up here on RealAg Radio and the RealAg Issues Panel. Next, we're going to talk about, okay, so the federal government's cutting funding for 4-H. Now what? Who's got to step up? And what does that exactly look like? You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada. Vatterstad is partnering with Canadian farmers for outstanding emergence. Emergence is very important, people. Pay attention. Their line of tillage, seeding, and plant equipment offers solutions for all soil types, field conditions, and tillage practices. Lyndsey loves tillage. Helping you to maximize yield. To learn more and find your local dealer, visit Vatterstad.com. Yeah, all I can tell you guys is I have so much fun reading these ads. It is one of the highlights of my day. Okay, so now Real Agriculture broke the story about the federal government backing away from their funding of 4-H because it didn't meet the priorities of the program that the funding request was under. So now the question is, now we've the outrage is simmered. Okay, it's a question of now what? And clearly, people are saying that 4-H is important for a number of different reasons. We don't need to kind of go over those. We know what those benefits are. So, Lyndsey, the question is, based on the amount of money that there's in terms of the shortfall, so to speak, who has to step up?
So, it's a great question. And I don't know that there's one answer necessarily. It's probably going to be several different organizations, companies, individuals, etc. So what we're looking at for 4-H Canada, for those just to catch everybody up, they ended up halfway through a fiscal budget already. So they hadn't received word on what they were going to get for funding. They were already well into the year. When they finally did receive the nod from AAFC, it was for half of what was expected. And so they did manage their way through the next couple months, and now they've sort of set the course for 2024, 25, and 26. But it meant that it was a significant reduction, and they've had to reduce staff by 35%. Obviously, this is going to have an impact on programming and what 4-H Canada can accomplish. There's probably a lot to be discussed on, why the government did this or what that signals. But ultimately, a lot of the feedback we've had or the sentiment that's out there is, okay, so, should companies be stepping up? Should individuals be stepping up? What do we want to continue that 4-H may not be able to do, and how do we support that? Now, I hear all that, but at the same time, 4-H Canada does partner with a lot of organizations, and plenty of ag organizations out there already support 4-H Canada. If they do any fundraising, that's the beneficiary of it. So we already have a lot of this. And so the question is, how much more can we be asking of our industry? How much more of individuals or of individual companies could we be asking for? To me, I'm not sure who takes the lead on it. I would hope it's 4-H Canada to say, here's the programming we want to do. Who's out there that wants to see this happen? Because frankly, we don't necessarily have the budget for it. I will just add as a quick note before Kelvin hops in here that there are a couple other funding requests that have not been decided on yet, according to 4-H Canada. So, there's the potential, of course, that everything goes as they've planned, but there is also, of course, the possibility that there's more funding yet that doesn't come through. So they're still waiting to hear that to see what sort of happens in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I am wondering if we're not going to see more of this going forward as governments of both political sides try to find, trying to balance the budget and all this kind of stuff, depending how much of a priority that really is. But user pay and Kelvin, what I mean by that is, hey, you guys, industry, you think this is important? In this situation, farmers, companies that sell to farmers, stakeholders, let her buck, fund it, because you feel you're the one that gets the benefit and not the broader taxpayer. Is that real?
I think there's something to that argument, but I don't think that it covers everything, because I think that 4-H provides a public good, and it's good for Canada as a whole to have kids going, the mentorship, the leadership, all of the things that people learn, or the ideas behind 4-H, investing in the future generation. I think there's a public good aspect to it, and industry-wide and economy-wide, especially in rural parts of Canada, that I think there is an argument that public money should be spent on 4-H because there's a public good that comes out of it. I don't know to what extent, and I think there are other organizations. We had a lot of this is just coming to the forefront now because of the where we're at in the SCAP cycle, the partnership that started last year. Some of those funding announcements and approvals have yet to take place. But I think there will be other organizations too where government is kind of going through this process. And I think that is a healthy process, budgeting and figuring out where there is stuff that can be trimmed. But I think there's also a lot of good arguments that it's not in investing in our young people and the future of our industries and future leaders and that type of thing.
Also remember too, 4-H, not just a rural benefit. You talk about it being a public good. It's also, there's a lot of urban 4-H clubs too, which is again why it confuses me why the government took this stance on this amount of money, and clearly saying in their statement, not a priority. Like it read carefully. Bad job.
Well, and so and a couple things. So exactly that. There's in the last few years, I mean, 4-H recognize that we've got a shrinking farm kid population, and the organization as a whole has been adapting to offering more urban-based clubs and topics that are of interest, working more on the STEM side, which is a part of what 4-H has always done, but definitely moving it, somewhat further, a bit of a broader scope than strictly on agriculture, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an organization that, was already evolving that way and has continued to. The other part is that a lot of people are sort of scratching their heads over, and a couple of our audience members, really great on Twitter, pulled a couple of the funding announcements or different paperwork that the government had funded. And so we're not talking about millions or billions of dollars here. It's a pretty small budget, but obviously to 4-H, it's a lot of money. But the government has handed out way more money for one-off projects. Whether it was a grain dryer project that was under one of the funding windows or those sorts of things. So I get the point about, governments deciding where money's going to go and cutting back here, cutting back there. But on the grand scheme of things, this is not a ton of money for the government to save, and they have spent way more on far less impactful things. And so it is a bit of a head scratcher on that one.
Yeah, I got a friend whose kid's in 4-H, who's in I believe it's like a computer coding 4-H club.
Yeah,
so there's
sure.
lots of, and we just got to get 4-H to show how 4-H reduces emissions. Then we're good.
Perfect. Somebody do that for their project.
The deadline to sign up for AgriStability is April 30th. Thanks to recent program changes, AgriStability coverage levels have improved significantly for 24. To gain a better understanding of how AgriStability and other programs can improve your farm's risk management plan, of course, go to mmp.ca. That's all the time we have here this week for the RealAg Issues Panel. Make sure you check out RealAgriculture.com. Well, you're taking in the weekend, shoveling yourself out for some of that snow, depending on where you are in the country. And as well, check out our other podcast, RealAg on the weekend as well. And The Agronomist on Monday night, 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain, hosted by Lyndsey Smith. That's always a great show. It's RealAg in prime time, live and in person. Kelvin, Lyndsey, have yourself a great weekend.
Cheers.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, if you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And, of course, we'll chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Barricade 2 Herbicide from FMC. Use Barricade 2 Herbicide for consistent, powerful control of the toughest in-crop weeds without harming your wheat, oats, or barley crop. Barricade 2 Herbicide. Tough on weeds, gentle on crops.